刘培元的英文教室经典演说篇，我们在回顾回顾14到16为什么要回顾呢？因为我们前面讲都讲过，但是因为本身有点长这些演说都蛮长，而且还要解释，还要做一些引申，所以都分好几集。那我们现在呢，只要把它念出来，念出来几个目的第一个，你训练听力听力你可以边看字边听我讲那另外你也可以都不看就纯粹训练听力第三个就要回顾一下，把整个这些都经典的演说把整个意思再贯通一下，然后再来一个，你听听我的发音如果假设我的发音比你好，那我是我台湾人嘛台湾人，当然我觉得也是中国人华人嘛，没去过美国，也没留过学但是我的发音你觉得怎么样？如果你觉得还不错那你就学一下，看看我的发音当你觉得我发音不好，那你就忍耐一下我们来念一下这美国小布希总统第二任的演说他爸爸是老布希。 Vice President Cheney, Mr. Chief Justice, President Carter, President Bush, President Clinton, members of the United States Congress, Reverend clergy, distinguished guests, fellow citizens. On this day prescribed by law and marked by ceremony, we celebrate the durable wisdom of our Constitution and recall the deep commitments that unite our country. I'm grateful for the honor of this hour, mindful of the consequential times in which we live, and determined to fulfill the oath that I have sworn and you have witnessed. At this second gathering, our duties are defined not by the words used, but by the history we have seen together. For the half a century, America defended our own freedom by standing watch on distant borders. After the shipwreck of communism came years of relative quiet, years of repose, years of sabbatical, and then there came a day of fire. We have seen our vulnerability, and we have seen its deepest source. For these laws, whole regions of the world simmer in resentment and tyranny, prone to ideologies that feed hatred and excuse murder. Violence will gather and multiply in destructive power, and cross the most defended borders, and raise a mortal threat. There is only one force of history that can break the reign of hatred and resentment, and expose the pretensions of tyrants and reward the hopes of decent tolerant, and that is the force of human freedom. We are led by events and common sense to one conclusion: the survival of liberty in our land increasingly depends on the success of liberty in other lands. The best hope for peace in our world is the expansion of freedom in other world. America's vital interests and our deepest beliefs are now one. From the day of our founding, we have proclaimed that every man and woman of this earth has rights and dignity and matchless value because they bear the images of Maker of heaven and earth. Across the generations, we proclaim the imperative of self-government because no one is fit to be a master and no one deserves to be a slave. Advancing those ideas is a mission that creates our nation. It is the honorable achievement of our fathers. Now it is the urgent requirement of our nation's security and the calling of our time. So it is the policy of the United States to seek and support the growth of democratic movements and institutions in every nation culture with the ultimate goal of ending tyranny in our world. This is not primarily the task of arms, that we will defend ourselves and our friends by force of arms when necessary. Freedom, by its nature, must be chosen and defended by citizens and sustained by the rule of law and the protection of minorities. And when the soul of a nation finally speaks, the institutions that rise may reflect customs and traditions very different from our own. America will not impose our own style of government on the unwilling. Our goal instead is to help others find their own voice, attain their own freedom, and make their own way. The great objective of ending tyranny is the concentrated work of generations. The difficulty of task is no excuse for avoiding it. America's influence is not unlimited, but fortunately for the oppressed, America's influence is considerable, and we will use it confidently in freedom's cause. My most solemn duty is to protect this nation and its people from further attacks and emerging threats. Some have unwisely chosen to test America's resolve and have found it firm. We will persistently clarify the choice before every ruler and every nation. The moral choice between oppression, which is always wrong, and freedom, which is eternally right. America will not pretend that jailed dissidents prefer their chains, or that women welcome humiliation and servitude, or that any human being aspires to love and mercy the bullies. We encourage reform in other governments by making clear the success in our relations will require the decent treatment of their own people. Americans believe in human dignity will guide our policies, yet rights must be more than the grudging concessions of dictators. They are secured by free dissent and the participation of the governed. In the long run, there is no justice without freedom, and there can be no human rights without human liberty. Some I know have questioned the global pure liberty, though this time in history, 4 decades defined by the swiftest advance of freedom ever seen, is an odd time for doubt. Americans of all people should never be surprised by the power of our ideals. Eventually, the call of freedom comes to every mind and every soul. We do not accept the existence of permanent tyranny because we do not accept the possibility of permanent slavery. Liberty will come to those who love it. Today, America speaks anew to the peoples of the world. All who live in tyranny and hopelessness can know the United States will not ignore your oppression or excuse your oppressors. When you stand for your liberty, we will stand with you. Democratic reformers facing oppression, prison, or exile can know America sees you for who you are, the future leaders of our free country. The rulers of all our regimes can know that we still believe as Abraham Lincoln did. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and under the rule of a just God cannot long retain it. The leaders of government with long habits of control need to know to serve your people, you must learn to trust them. Start on the journey of progress and justice. America will walk at your side. And all the allies of the United States can know we honor your friendship, we rely on your counsel, and we depend on your help. Divisions among the free nations is the primary goal of freedom's enemies. The concerted effort of free nations to promote democracy is a prelude to our enemy's defeat. Today I shall speak anew to my fellow citizens. Fellow of you, I have asked patience in the hard task of securing America, which you have granted in good measure. Our country has accepted obligations that are difficult to fulfill and will be dishonorable to abandon. Yet, because we have acted in the great liberating traditions of this nation, tens of millions have achieved their freedom. and as hope kindles hope, millions more will find it. But our efforts will lit a fire as well, a fire in the minds of men. It warns those who feel its power, it burns those who fight its progress, and one day this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of the world. A few Americans have accepted the hardest duties in this cause, in the quiet work of intelligence and diplomacy. The idealistic work of helping raise up free governments, the dangerous and necessary work of fighting our enemies. Some have shown their devotion to our country in deaths that honor their whole lives, and we will always honor their names and their sacrifice. All the Americans have witnessed this idealism, and some for the first time. I ask our youngest citizens to believe the evidence of our eyes. You have seen duty and allegiance in the determined faces of our soldiers. You have seen that life is fragile, and evil is real, and courage triumphs. Make the choice to serve in a cause larger than your wants, larger than yourself, and in your days you will add not just to the wealth of a country, but to its character. America's need of idealism and courage because we have essential work at home, the unfinished work of American freedom. In the world moving toward liberty, we are determined to show the meaning and promise of liberty. In America's idea of freedom, citizens find the dignity and security of economic independence instead of laboring on the age of subsistence. This is the broadest definition of liberty that motivates the Homestead Act, the Social Security Act, and the GI Bill rights. And now we will extend the vision by reforming greater institutions to serve the needs of our time. To give every American a stake in the promise and future of our country, we will bring the high standards to our schools and build an ownership society. We will write in ownership of homes and business, retirement savings and health insurance, preparing our people for the challenges of life in a free society. By making every citizen an agent of his or her own destiny, we will give our fellow Americans greater freedom from want and fear, and make our society more prosperous and just and equal. In America's idea of freedom, the public interest depends on private character, on integrity, and tolerance toward others, and the rule of conscience in our own lives. Self-government relies in the end on the governing of the self. The edifice of character is built in families, supported by communities with standards, and sustained in our national life by the truths of Sinai, the Sermon on the Mount, the words of the Quran, and the very face of our people. Americans move forward in every generation by reaffirming that is good and true that came before. Ideas of justice and conduct that are the same yesterday, today, and forever. In America's idea of freedom, the exercise of rights is ennobled by service and mercy and heart for the weak. Liberty for does not mean independence from one another. Our nation relies on men and women who look after neighbor and surround the lost with love. Americans at our best value the life we see in one another, and must always remember that even the unwanted have worth. And our country must abandon the habits of racism, because we cannot carry the message of freedom and the baggage of bigotry at the same time. So the perspective of a single day, including this day of dedication, the issues and questions before our country are many. From the viewpoint of centuries, questions that come to us are narrowed and few. Did our generation advance the cause of freedom? And did our character bring credit to that cause? This question that judge us also united us. Because Americans of every part and background, Americans by choice and by birth, are bound to one another in the cause of freedom. We're known divisions which must be healed to move forward in great purposes, and I will strive in good faith to heal them. Yet the divisions do not divide America. But found in unity and fellowship of our nation, when freedom came under attack, and our response came like a single hand over a single heart. And we can feel the same unity and pride whenever Americans act for good. And the victims of disaster are given hope, and unjust encounter justice, and the captives are set free. We go forward with complete confidence in the eventual triumph of freedom. Not because history rounds on the wheels of inevitability. It is human choices that move the advance. Not because we consider ourselves a chosen nation. God moves and chooses as He wills. With confidence because of freedom is a permanent hope of mankind. The hunger and dark places, the longing of the soul. We the founders declare a new order of ages when soldiers die in way upon way for a union based on liberty. When citizens march in peaceful outrage under the banner of freedom now, they were acting on the ancient hope that's meant to be fulfilled. History has an ebb and flow of justice, but history also has a visible direction set by liberty and authors of liberty. When the Declaration of Independence was first read in public and the Liberty Bell was sounded in celebration, a witness said, "It ran as if it meant something. In our time, it means something still." America in this young century proclaims liberty throughout the world, and you are the inhabitants thereof. Renewed in our strength, tested but not weary, we're ready for the greatest achievements in the history of freedom. May God bless you, and may He watch over the United States of America. 这些大部分都是经典演说，一些美国总统的演说都是文字都很棒，当然一定棒嘛，有文胆在写，所以这些要多看多看你的英文就变得比较高大上我有15个 YouTube 频道，不是只有一个麻烦一下，老话一句按15个不要只按一个，花个3分钟时间这一集讲到这里。